Good evening and welcome to the February 7, 2022 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask our City Attorney, Lynn Board, to lead us in the pledge tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Next on our agenda is our reflection, and I'd just like to call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you all very much. Next on our agenda is approval of minutes. Tonight we have 3 sets of minutes before us. The first is from the regular session held on December 6th. What is the pleasure of the council? Rob.
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Jim McNulty.
I'll second.
Okay, I will call the roll. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
And Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
All right, carries 4-0. Next, we have the minutes from the regular session on January 3rd, 2022. What is the pleasure of the council? Jim.
Mr. Mayor, I will move approval of the minutes.
Okay, Rob.
Second.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
And Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Okay, carries 4-0. Next, we have the minutes from the work session on Monday, January 24th, 2022. What is the pleasure of the council? Neil.
Move approval.
Lisa.
I second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
All right, carries 4-0. Thank you all very much. And next, tech team, if you could bring up the proclamation for Black History Month. And I am going to ask Lisa Henderson to read the background material, and as we all see the actual proclamation on screen. Go ahead, Lisa.
February is dedicated as Black History Month, honoring the triumph and struggles of African Americans throughout U.S. history, including the Civil Rights Movement and their artistic, cultural, and political achievements. Celebrated annually in the United States during the month of February, Black History Month was started in 1926 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. He sought to bring national attention to the important contributions of African Americans to the history of the United States. Woodson chose February because it includes the birthdays of Frederick Douglass, Langston Hughes, and Abraham Lincoln. In the month of February, the City of Gaithersburg Multicultural Affairs Committee will recognize Black History Month with a history display portraying the journey from slavery until today. The journey details the fight for freedom, justice, and equality through events, people, landmarks, and traditions. The Black History display will be available for viewing at the Activity Center from February 8th through 25th. Additionally, the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Department invites the community to attend a virtual presentation introducing Gaithersburg Black History Research Project, story times at the Arts Barn and Community Museum, a Black History Symposium at the Benjamin Gaither Center, and a family-friendly musical celebration, including tasty books and the viewing of the movie Soul at the Casey Community Center. Receiving this year's proclamation is Gregory Plummer, owner of Plum's Hair Gallery. Mr. Plummer has operated a shop in Old Town since 1988, and for the past 35 years has been a barber school instructor, where he has been instrumental in countless graduates establishing their own shops. Mr. Plummer supports the community by giving free haircuts to children returning or entering school for the first time, and he offers discounted haircuts to incarcerated individuals at the 7 Locks and Clarksburg Correctional Facilities.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and we thank Mr. Plummer for receiving the proclamation. And I'll just say, as an aside, a total aside to this, we're showing the movie Soul. If you haven't seen it yet, Soul is a spectacular movie. So I recommend it. And with that, the next item on our agenda is public comments. This is the time that Mayor and Council like to hear from anybody who'd like to speak on any topic that's not a public hearing topic. Tonight, we do have a couple of public hearings. So if you're here tonight to speak about the potential amendments to our historic preservation ordinance, or if you're here to speak about the mayor and council personnel policy, and just hold off, we're going to get to those two things next. But in the meantime, if there's anybody who'd like to speak on anything else, tech team, if you would play the instructional video, that would be great.
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raise hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
Thank you, tech team. And actually, as I look at it, I'm only seeing members of who are part of actual presentations tonight in the audience. So I don't think we have anybody from the public who'd like to speak at this point, but maybe they'll join us during our public hearings. So for now, tech team, if you could bring in, because I don't see any speakers, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is our joint public hearing with the Planning Commission. Tech team, if you could bring everybody in, that would be great. And we will talk about our historic preservation, historic district ordinance. However, we want to classify this broadly enough to encompass everything we're going to be discussing here. And also make sure to bring in Chris Berger because he's leading us in this presentation.
I'm trying. He's not coming over right now. I will continue to try.
Okay. Greg, since you're here, maybe while we're waiting to figure out getting Chris in, if you want to take the lead. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
here
no,
comes
no
Chris.
problem.
I'm here.
All right, welcome, Chris. And thank you, Greg. Greg was ready to step up, and I really appreciate it. Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening. This is the joint public hearing for application CTAM 9162-2022, which is amendments to Chapter 24, Article 12 of the City Code titled Preservation of Historic Resources. The tech team can pull up packet page 44, please. Staff presented potential code changes to the Mayor and City Council and Planning Commission during a joint work session on August 23rd, 2021. Both boards concurred that there was a sufficient need to amend the Preservation Code. Then the council voted to sponsor the amendments at its January 3rd meeting. Staff also sought input from the Historic District Commission on the proposed changes at both the HDC's June 23rd and November 22nd meetings, and the HDC was supportive of the changes. I'll now briefly go through the major changes. Next page, please, page 45. The process to designate or remove historic designation is not clear under section 24-226. The process begins with a petition to designate from either the Mayor and City Council, Planning Commission, Historic District Commission, or the property owner, which is followed by a triple public hearing. After that, the Historic District Commission and Planning Commission provide recommendations to the Mayor and City Council before the Mayor and City Council takes final action. Staff does not seek to overhaul the process so much as to clarify it. For example, the code does not specify that the triple public hearing includes the Mayor and City Council, Planning Commission, and Historic District Commission. The benefits of this change will help the Mayor and Council, staff, the HTC and the Planning Commission and the public clearly understand the process to designate or remove designation. Next page, please. So continuing in that same code section, staff believes it should not be easy to remove historic designation from a property, but staff is concerned it is impossible to remove designation if a property no longer meets the applicable criteria. Staff would like to improve the designation removal requirements and still protect the city's historic resources. We'd like to allow the City Council to remove designation in the following instances: if a property owner demonstrates the resource through demolition, alteration, or loss of integrity has lost its historic qualities and no longer meets the criteria for historic designation, or removal of designation is necessary to accomplish the goals of the master plan and the city's strategic direction, or removal of designation for undue economic hardships when there is no reasonable use of the property and the hardship is not because of property owner neglect. The code section received the most discussion at the August 23rd work session. The consensus was that the proposed changes would provide the mayor and council with more flexibility, but designation removal should rise to a higher standard and be limited to specific circumstances. Based on the recommendation made at the work session, staff added language that designation could be removed only if a supermajority of council members vote in favor. Next page, please. The code allows the HDC to grant staff the ability to approve certain categories of work, which are listed on this slide. The Historic District Commission did just that in 2019, but staff now seeks to add those administrative approvals to the code so that they're on the record. Next page, please. We'd like to eliminate code sections that are no longer relevant. And for example, impact review areas are properties that adjoin historic resources where the Historic District Commission may make recommendations to the Planning Commission on site development applications. The code section was approved in 1996 when the existing historic preservation article of the city code was established, but the mayor and city council have never enacted impact review areas. So staff is confident going forward, the existing code requirements and site plan review process will limit the effect any potential development may have on properties that adjoin historic resources. And we would like to eliminate this section from the code. Next page, please. The process by which the Historic District Commission can hold up a demolition permit for structures 50 years old or older, and then petition the mayor and city council to designate a property as historic, it's unclear. So we're adding that the HDC must petition the mayor and city council by resolution, and the mayor and city council must vote to accept the petition before the designation process may be initiated. We also seek to amend the code to give the city manager or his or her designee the ability to release a demolition permit if the city council denies the Historic District Commission's petition. This section should cross-reference the designation process under section 24-226A. In the last bullet, we also want to add a time limit on demolition review. Right now, once the HDC determines a property 50 years or older does not meet the criteria for designation, that review is valid, even if it took place decades ago and the subject building was never demolished. So we're adding a 2-year time limit to demolition reviews with the option for a 1-year extension. And next page, please. And finally, these are some of the minor changes that we'd like to address throughout the code. Are there any questions? And I'll also note that, as you know, I'm joined tonight by Community Planning Manager Greg Mann.
Thank you so much, Chris. I just want to give a little bit of background. It's not a question, but a little background that some of these items that we're looking at now are sort of holdovers from a previous way that we had organized this system. It used to be, I think it was before everybody, all of you guys were on the city council, but you know, John Bauer and Matt Hopkins remember it well. I'm sure it used to be that the mayor and council would sit as the Historic District Commission. We had a volunteer historic preservation advisory committee. They'd make recommendations. But it would be the mayor and council where we literally recess a meeting, a mayor and council meeting, we reconvene, concurrently as the Historic District Commission. We'd hear these items, and then we would adjourn that and reconvene as mayor and council. It was kind of a weird dance, and we changed the system some years ago. And I feel like we didn't have some of these things prescribed in code because we didn't need to, because essentially the mayor and council was acting in both roles. And that's part of it. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but certainly I think some of the things we're dealing with now that are before us, these recommendations from staff, are still that adjustment to having two separate bodies sort of look at these issues. And so anyway, I was, Rob Wu and Neil Harris and I were part of the elected body that listened to the presentation last August. Jim and Lisa were not. And if they have any questions, certainly I'd open it up to them, or anybody else. Just raise your hand if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll go to the public. John Bauer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a brief question. Chris, for context, in the and this is a little bit of an offshoot of a discussion that happened at our work session, but in 24-226, and it's getting into the criteria. Now, I'm not going to be able to cite the subsections because by the time you edit it, they're going to change. But it's the paragraph that talks about they'll remain sites shall remain designated as historically architecturally significant unless such designation is removed by a subsequent resolution of the mayor and city council. And then it has the three criteria. The first one being the resource through alteration or loss of integrity has lost its historic qualities and no longer meets the criteria for historic designation. So is there anything that anchors that to a legitimate reason that it's lost the integrity or historic qualities, whatever.
Yeah, I can give, a hypothetical situation. Perhaps the property is located along when it was designated, it was a small, 2-lane road, and then the roads widened and the surroundings have completely changed from development, and a property that may have been designated because it was somewhat rural area and surrounded by minimal development is suddenly surrounded by, dense development. Another situation could be, and both these instances have happened in the city, a tree falls on a property and it completely destroys it, or a car, crashes into a property and it's just not feasible to rebuild, or the owner, no longer wants to rebuild. Those are situations where a property could lose its integrity. So
to be perfectly blunt, is there any way, so let's take demolition by neglect as a category of why this might happen. Would they be disqualified from qualifying for removal of designation if that's the cause? And is this explicit?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we want to avoid demolition by neglect situations well in advance, but no, the property owner could not remove designation because they let the property go. They did not.
And is that explicit in this ordinance? Because I really couldn't find that specific reference.
I believe we did call it out as one of the reasons why demolition cannot be, I can't find the specific reference now, and it may be in a later code section.
Okay.
I do believe is explicitly called out that we did try to, call that out.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, John. Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a question following up on what Commissioner Bauer was just talking about, because we did talk about this a lot when we last met and expressed the concern about the concept of demolition by neglect. And so I was recently reading an article about tree removal in DC and how developers will just completely ignore the code, incur the fine so that they can build. And so can we take almost an extreme example here of a recalcitrant homeowner with a house that has a historic designation, they let it go into neglect. We go through our code enforcement processes, but ultimately they make the decision that without the structure on the property, the value of the land is worth more. And so they let it continue to go into neglect until basically it is uninhabitable and derelict. How do we deal with those kind of situations here, where you do have developers that may be willing to kind of push the extremes of our land use and our code enforcement in order to use to meet their ends on any given property?
Well, I think the key is to get involved, the city staff get involved as soon as possible whenever we notice a property, sort of losing maintenance, falling by the wayside. Staff get heavily involved, and hopefully that pressure is enough to get the property in a good, better condition or repaired so it doesn't keep falling down that slope and we get a situation as you described.
And so,
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
That's
okay.
all.
I was going to say one of the things that was proposed in that situation was if you allow, if the developer takes actions that are contrary to the statute, that they're considering adopting, for example, a code change that says if you do that, you can never develop that property. Would we consider that in this case, that if we go to the extreme on demolition by neglect, that we say, okay, you'll incur those fines. At the end of the day, we'll also not allow you to do what you really want to do on that property. That was the example that was cited in the article in the discussion of tree removal in DC.
Chris, I think Lynn wants to weigh in on this point.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I was going to address the last point first, and then I'll come back to this point. We do in section 24.230 of the ordinance is the section that deals with demolition by neglect. It does allow the city to take pretty aggressive action. The city can actually go in and make repairs to the property and charge that to the owner and put a lien on the property. Like I said, we've been fortunate not to have to do that in Gaithersburg, but I've done that in other jurisdictions where that has occurred. Again, so we can be very active in enforcement if the property owner is not cooperative. With regard to your second question, I think we're getting very close to a takings claim, whether we're taking all value of the land. So, I think that would be something we would want to look at very closely before we included that type of a provision in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. I was just curious about kind of the mechanisms here, but if we're confident that as written, it is sufficient to kind of meet the city's interest in preserving historic properties, even in the face of perhaps issues with respect to wanting to develop the land or move it beyond the historic character. Okay, thank you.
Jim, did I just see your hand?
Yeah, I did have it's probably a new guy question, but this came up previously, talking about the supermajority to make this done, and understanding the desire to make sure that if a change, or if a designation is going to be removed, that it's really a high bar to meet. I guess my question is there anything else in the city code that uses a supermajority? And if there's not, what makes this different to be able to have a council or a new council be able to make a decision?
I'll defer to Lynn if there's any other sections of the code that have a supermajority. I think the second part of your question, I think it's just the seriousness of the situation. To designate a property has to meet of course, the applicable criteria. So to go back on that decision by a council, I think really shows the gravity of the situation, that there must have been a lot of loss of integrity, or it must meet some of the criteria that we're adding to the code now to meet the needs of removing designation. So, but as for other sections of the code for a supermajority, I'm not sure about that.
I believe actually rezoning to MXD that's not called out in the master plan to be MXD does require a supermajority from the council.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we're not setting this particular process apart. And I'm glad to hear that there are other mechanisms that do require this. So that answers my question.
All right, do we have any other questions before we go to the public? Not seeing any hands, then this is the time the Mayor and Council and Planning Commission would like to hear from anybody who'd like to testify on this issue. We ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. If you have more than 3 minutes to deliver, then feel free to deliver it in writing. It will be considered just like oral testimony. State your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak? Just use the Zoom raise hand function. Going once, going twice. I do not see any hands up. So we will end the public part of our public hearing. Any final comments or questions from staff before we move on? Chris? Good, okay. All right, well then, we thank everybody. I guess we have to go to the recommendations now. We'll go to Commissioner Bauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold their record open. Am I on mute? I'm okay. Excuse me. The staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold their record open until 5 p.m. Friday, March 4th, 2022. That's 32 days with anticipated recommendation to the council on March 16th, 2022. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I've got a, it's moved and seconded. Commissioner Wessel,
Aye.
Commissioner Kaufman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hopkins,
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. That passes unanimously. Mr. Mayor?
All right, and our recommendation is that we hold our record open until 5 p.m. Friday, March 18th, 2022, which is 46 days with anticipated policy discussion on April 4th, 2022. What is the pleasure of the council? Neil.
So moved.
Rob.
Second.
Okay, I will call the roll. All in favor say aye, any opposed say nay. Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
All right, carries 4-0. We thank everybody and we'll move on to our next agenda item. Everyone have a great night. Let me just pull this up. Okay, Lynn, you are leading us in the next.
The next 5 items.
Yes, next 5 items we're going to do all as one public hearing.
Yes, we're having consolidated public hearing on 2 amendments to the charter, 2 amendments to the city code, and the adoption of regulations. All of these items are related to the direction that was provided by the mayor and city council back last spring to look at regulations that would control in the unlikely event that there would be misconduct by the mayor or a member of council. These amendments really came out of an issue that occurred in another jurisdiction, and it caused our council, mayor and council, to raise a question like, well, what if that happened here? What remedies could we impose? Back in the spring, back in May, the mayor appointed a subcommittee to work on this issue. The members of the subcommittee were Councilmember Spiegel and Sesma, and then City Manager Briley and I assisted the subcommittee in their work. So tonight's public hearing was duly advertised in the Washington Post. So I'm going to go briefly through each of these sections, and then we'll certainly open it up for questions. The first is an amendment to Section 6 of the city charter. And this amendment really allows the mayor and council some flexibility in the scheduling of its meetings. So it's not quite so rigid. And it does refer the scheduling to regulations to be adopted. Section 17 is a little bit more of the meat of the issue with personal actions with the mayor and council. And it provides automatic removal from office in 1 of 3 situations. If the individual is no longer domiciled in the city, if they are removed or they're required to be removed under the Maryland Constitution or some other state statute, or if they miss 4 or more consecutive meetings without excuse. I know when we met at the work session, there were some questions about domicile and what was domicile. So there was a memo in your packet explaining kind of the legal requirements for domicile. Also, with regard to the provision that someone could be removed as required by the Maryland Constitution or state law, there are existing provisions in the Maryland Constitution that address issues of malfeasance, misfeasance, nonfeasance in office. And also if there is an elected official is convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor. And there are already provisions in the Maryland Constitution requiring removal under some of those circumstances. So we really didn't feel the need to kind of repeat those provisions in this code, just reference to the state law provisions. So the changes to the city code, there are two. They are in section 7A2 and section 1713.1 of the code. These are the provisions that deal with both the Ethics Commission and the city's Personnel Review Board. And the changes to these code sections grants both of those commissions additional authority, and it would give them authority to meet jointly as a body to review and hold hearings on allegations of misconduct by elected officials. And finally, the regulations. This is where a little bit more of the meat of the process is included. The regulations do contain a detailed process for complaints against elected officials, how those complaints are reviewed and investigated, and a hearing process, and then a recommendation process, and then includes potential enforcement actions against the elected officials. The regulations also include provisions dealing with the mayor and council meetings and the scheduling of those meetings, what constitutes an excused absence, the remote participation in meetings, and compliance with safety policies by the mayor and council. And with that, I would open it up for any questions that you may have.
I don't have a question, just want to make a quick comment to underscore and italicize what Lynn began this presentation with. Just saying, in many cases, you would see something like this in reaction to something that happened in the jurisdiction. In this case, that is not at all what has happened. We observed something happen in another jurisdiction or read reports of it. We didn't personally observe it. And the question came, what would we do if, and that resulted in this discussion and this action. So we are being proactive, not reactive here. And with that, I want to open it up to any questions or comments from the council, and we'll go to Neil first, and then once we're done with that, we'll go to the public. Go ahead, Neil.
So I had one quick question about something I haven't heard, but was discussed at the previous session regarding once we're back in-person meetings, there was a discussion of a limit to how many virtual meetings someone could attend. Is that still part of the discussion?
Yes, that is part of the regulations. And sorry, I'm scrolling through quickly to get to that section. It is on page 135 of the packet. There's a provision on remote participation. We had just kind of as in the initial draft thrown out, would allow the mayor or member of council to participate remotely 3 times per calendar year. I know that there was some discussion during the introduction that was a fairly small number. The regulations are not like the code or the charter. They can be amended at final policy adoption, discussion and adoption. So, you know, certainly you all can discuss whether you think 3 is an appropriate number or if there should be some other number, because I know that there was some discussion of you didn't want it so open-ended, you know, that people never came to meetings, but, you know, was 3 too small of a number?
Yeah, I still have concern about that, and I'm happy to discuss it in the future. But again, the point that I made last time is if someone has to travel and miss a meeting, if they have some semi-frequent travel and they need to, and they've already used up their allotment of 3 virtual meetings, under these regulations, the correct approach would be to be absent from the meeting rather than attend virtually. And I don't think that's an optimal solution here. So I hope we can think more carefully about what makes sense. I understand the point about not wanting to allow someone to serve on the council 100% or a very large number of meetings virtually. But I think if circumstances require it, it should be okay.
Yeah, also just by way of a little bit of background, We did do some research into other jurisdictions of what they allowed, and we did find that only 2 jurisdictions allowed remote participation, and 3 was the number. I will admit that was all pre-pandemic and pre-going to virtual meetings. So, I mean, I think the playing field has definitely changed since then.
Well, so as Lynn said to that point, Neil, this is part of the regulation and not the ordinance. And so we could, I mean, even if we go past the time of approval of the ordinance and the regulation, at any point we could, just by resolution with the majority of the council, make an amendment to that regulation. It's fairly easy to do. But I take your point too. If somebody's already exercised their 3 remote meetings and then something comes up and they say, well, I guess I shouldn't participate even if they could. Yeah, I take that point. I mean, maybe we sort of say it as a guideline, like as opposed to a hard rule. I don't know how best to approach that particular issue, but I do know that we have some flexibility given that it's a regulation.
Right. I would just be concerned about having the regulation written that way without making it clear that there's flexibility aside from rewriting the regulation. Some sort of permission, vote of the council, permission from the mayor, an excuse from the doctor or your wife or something.
Yeah, some sort of extenuating circumstance situation.
I'm being a little facetious, but I think we should just have something up front that makes it more reasonable.
Okay. Any other comments? Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm just kind of following up on my comments from the last session on this. I will note that as far as the regulation is concerned, where I'd like to focus, and it's probably the one instance where I don't think the mayor should ever have to vote, nor any of us have to vote for that matter. Any other situation, I think the mayor should have a chance to vote. The one area I'd just like to raise is my concern about a 4-person vote of removal of office of one of their colleagues. I mentioned this before. That's the one situation where I would think that it would behoove us to think about having a unanimous vote of those that are not implicated in the conduct. So in the case of a mayoral vote and one council member is implicated, that would mean 5 votes to remove from office. But otherwise, I'm fine with what's being presented. So just throwing that out there for hopeful conversation.
Thank you, Rob. I am muted. Just a note, I noticed Lisa Henderson's no longer with us on screen, so I just texted her and she says she is rebooting right now. So there you go. Jim, do you have anything you'd like to add here while we're waiting for Lisa?
Sure. I agree with Neil with regard to having concern about limiting the number of times one can participate remotely. I think the pandemic has shown us that it is possible to be effective virtually, and depending on individuals' circumstances, Neil put out a hypothetical. I don't know if the council should be in playing the role of how an elected member is doing their job. The people put us in these positions, and it's up to us to do the best job that we can to execute that office. And if we don't do a good job, then the people vote us out. So I don't know if this is a place where we should be telling council members or the mayor that, well, if you've done it 3 times, then you can't participate virtually anymore. I think that's restrictive, and I think it's incumbent upon the elected official to execute the office to the best of their ability. And I think as adults, we should be able to figure out how to do that ourselves. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, I take your point, but currently the charter says how we hold our meetings. And so somebody at some point sort of dictated how we hold our meetings. I don't think it's out of bounds for us to set rules for how we hold our meetings. And I also think as I've argued before, I think it's important that we encourage to the greatest degree possible that we do this in person, that we are physically in front of the people who come to our meetings to testify and hold us accountable. So if I see very little sort of peril here for us to go down a wrong road, because it's so easy to correct in a regulation. If some things come up that in practical experience we say that we need to amend, but I think it's important that whatever we put in, we encourage to the greatest degree possible in-person participation. I think it's good for us as a body for working together, and I think it's good for the public. Because I think there is a difference in accountability level when you're in front of somebody versus when you're looking at little boxes on Zoom as we are. I got a text from Lisa saying her Wi-Fi has taken a dive. So I hope she can come back here and we'll see. But in the meantime, I guess we're going to open it up for the public. If anybody from the public would like to testify on this, just use the Zoom raise hand function and I will call on you. And let me switch over. I am not seeing any raised hands at the moment. So with that, I guess we'll have to catch up with Jim. Did you want to raise your hand?
I just wanted to acknowledge that, completely understand, setting the rules for the meeting. And I think Lisa's Wi-Fi failing is a kind of an ironic moment here. So just wanted to acknowledge that as well. But yes, your point is well taken. I just think that with the advances in technology and having been able to maintain, continuity of government, continuity of operations as well as we have over the past couple of years, that speaks to the ability of doing that. Yes, I think it's obviously more important. It is important to be in front of the people. I look forward to actually getting the opportunity to be in front of the people at some point, hopefully soon. So
agree. I look forward to you doing, for all of us, getting back to that too. And yes, Lisa's Wi-Fi took a dive just as I scripted it. So everything's working out just according to plan. For those of you with no sense of humor, I'm kidding. I am kidding. I had nothing to do with this. Okay, so with that, staff recommends that the mayor and council hold our record open until February 28th, 21 days, with anticipated policy discussion on March 7th. What is the pleasure of the council? Neil.
So moved.
Rob.
Second.
I will call the roll. Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
All right, carries 3-0. Our numbers are dwindling here. Okay, thank you all, and we will catch up with both Ryan and Lisa. Ryan's out of town and Lisa's got the Wi-Fi issue later on this issue. And anybody who has any feedback, please feel free to send it into the record. We'd be glad to consider it. With that, we're going to move on to from the mayor and city council, and we're going to start with Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief this evening. I did have the opportunity to talk to Cub Scout Pack 1438 and via Zoom, and it was a great conversation. They were working on their Building a Better World badge. So thank you to Scoutmaster Dave Gorey, a friend of mine from my television days, and I guess the conversation went really well because Dave told me afterwards that the kids said that I wasn't scary at all. So I took that as a compliment, and thank you to the Scouts for inviting me, and I hope to get to see them in person at some point as well. That is really the only event that I've had the opportunity to attend, other than a number of our work sessions and just going to my son's basketball games. He had a number of those over the past few weeks, so we're getting into a playoffs time. I will read an announcement, however, before I give the floor back. A closed meeting was held virtually by the mayor and city council on Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. at approximately 10:38 p.m. pursuant to a motion adopted unanimously. The meeting was proposed to be closed pursuant to general provisions of Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Sections 3-305B4, to consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state, and 3-305B8, to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. The topic discussed was an update on the status of the Fishman project at 315 East Diamond Avenue. Present at the meeting were Mayor Ashman, council members Harris, Henderson, McNulty, Spiegel, and Wu. Staff present were City Manager Briley, City Attorney Board, Deputy City Manager Enslinger, Assistant City Manager Lonigan Seeger, Director of Planning and Code Administration Schlichting, and Economic Development Manager Disk. Upon conclusion of the discussion, the closed meeting was adjourned at approximately 11:10 p.m. And that is all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Jim. We will go to the recently reappeared Lisa Henderson. Lisa, we're in from the mayor and council.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Xfinity's at it again. So for my update, last week I attended the annual economic development breakfast with Senator Chris Van Hollen, where the senator walked us through all of the upcoming federal plans and challenges. It was a great session. I also attended the Ghost Bike Memorial coordinated by the Action Committee for Transit in memory of the Walnut Hill resident, Ms. Chen, who was killed by a turning trash truck as she was cycling on January 14th. And this terrible event, it just magnifies our need for continued funding for mass transportation and mass transit and solutions to enhance both bicyclists and cyclists and pedestrian safety. I hope that all who celebrate had and are having a happy Lunar New Year. It's the year of the tiger, which is associated with bravery, confidence, and strong will, which we could use more of every day, especially as we continue to fight through this pandemic. Also, today in history is Eubie Blake, one of the most important figures of early 20th century African-American music. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1887 on February 7th. Mr. Blake was an American pianist and composer of ragtime, jazz, and popular music. Mr. Blake wrote Shuffle Along, which is one of the first Broadway musicals to be written and directed by African Americans. We honor his works locally through spectacular performances and artistic students that attend the Montgomery County Public Arts and Humanities Schools, James Hubert Blake High School in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I wish you all a very happy Black History Month. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We will go to Neil.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll go through a quick list of events and then read an announcement as well. So I also was in attendance at the annual Economic Development Breakfast with Senator Van Hollen. Just like to mention that he touched on several points that were very important to the city of Gaithersburg. Was obviously very well informed, which is awesome for someone who has statewide responsibilities and national responsibilities. But there was a significant discussion about NIST, which I think was instigated by my colleague, Robert Wu, and ways to leverage NIST better for the economic development and future of the city. He also discussed infrastructure and what's going on with COVID. So I thought it was a terrific session and really a credit to our city for attracting someone of that renown to come to our annual breakfast. Although I'm still waiting for the actual meal. I attended the Kentlands Community Foundation's annual meeting where was discussed the many different events and groups that are sponsored by that great organization, which serves not just the Kentlands and Lakelands community, but our entire city and surrounding areas. Attended a transportation committee meeting. And I want to say that in the years that I've been associated with that committee, I'm there's been some significant turnover recently that has brought some new energy to the group. The committee in the past has been a little, in my humble opinion, a little overly emphasizing bicycles to the exception of other modes of transportation. I think we're now back to more of a balance with some of the new members, and I'd encourage anybody watching this who's interested in transportation to consider attending or consider joining the committee. There's still several openings. But it's I've had a chance to meet one-on-one with several of the new members, and I think we've got some very thoughtful and well-educated people that are going to bring some strong direction to help our city move forward in transportation. Want to give some kudos to the city for organizing the COVID test and distribution project at the activity center at Borough Park. I attended the first day of that. There was a follow-up the following week, but it was incredibly smooth and quick. You could just drive up, get your test kit and move on, as opposed to the county ones where they were so well attended that you had to stand up in line in the cold and around the block. So the drive-through worked really, really well, and I was very proud to be part of it. And I know that the people who got their test kits were very happy with the service. And one more event I'll mention is our representatives from District 17, Senator Kagan and the 3 delegates held a town hall where they filled us in on, not just us, but filled in anyone from the community that wanted to participate on what's up this session, what their plans are, and they're working hard. And there's lots of interesting projects that they're attempting to go forward with at the Senate and House of Delegates. Now let me move to an announcement. The mayor and city council are seeking to fill 2 vacancies on the Board of Appeals for a full and an alternate member. The board is a quasi-judicial committee that hears and decides special exceptions and authorizes variances from the strict application of the terms or requirements of the city's zoning ordinance. Additionally, the board conducts administrative reviews of any final order, requirement, decision, or determination made by any administrative official, department of the city government as allowed by the city code, planning commission, or historic district commission. The Board of Appeals consists of 5 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council for 3-year terms. The positions will remain open until filled. All applicants must reside within the corporate city limits. Resumes and letters of interest should be submitted via mail to mayor and city council at 31 South Summit Avenue, Gaithersburg, Maryland, 20877, or by email to cityhall@gaithersburgmd.gov. For more information, visit the city's website or contact planner Carolyn Seiden at 240-805-1074. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We're going to go to Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to echo the sentiment expressed by Councilmember Harris regarding the well-organized and run COVID test distribution sites. I attended one, and I assume the other one was just as well organized and run and providing a valuable service to the community. And I know a lot of us had the opportunity to take part in it. I will note that, I did have the opportunity to attempt to attend one of the library distribution sites, which were, unfortunately, it looked a little overcrowded and overrun. And so I think if we're going to be having additional distribution sites, singing its praises as loud as we can to get people in, I think will relieve the burden on other distribution points around our community. But kudos to the staff and to all the volunteers who put that on. I too attended the economic development breakfast, and I was blown away by Senator Van Hollen's ability to address any number of topics that were thrown at him, including the question I asked about technology transfer, which, as Councilmember Harris had mentioned, is something that we were working on together prior to COVID. And it's a conversation that I think it's worth having from an economic development perspective here in the city. And I've had some additional conversations since the economic development breakfast and attempt to kind of revive that pathway of thinking. Just wanted to also mention and thank the mayor for allowing me to speak on behalf of the city at the county executives Lunar New Year celebration that was held last week. It was a great community event. I expressed the well wishes of the mayor and the council at that event. And also, you know, kind of the city's celebration of Black History Month, which is always important, but I kind of didn't recognize the tie-in between the ability for Asian Americans, AAPIs, to celebrate Lunar New Year here in America, and the long roots of activism in the Black community that really laid the pathwork for that other communities to be able to advocate and celebrate their culture as well. And it was a major point of topic at the county executives Lunar New Year celebration. And so I do appreciate that as well. And I'll end by mentioning that I did attend also the memorial that Council Member Henderson mentioned. It's a poignant yet it's a poignant reminder of the difficulties that we have with our infrastructure and the need to address it going forward. I did point out to Councilmember Reamer was there, and I pointed out to him as we were talking about bicycle infrastructure that the 355 BRT doesn't appear to have substantial bicycle infrastructure in it, and I asked them to take another look at that. And so hopefully we can have that conversation. And with that, I have an announcement. The mayor and city council are seeking to fill a vacancy on the Historic District Commission for an alternate member. The commission consists of 5 members and 1 alternate. It strives to ensure that historic resources within the city are preserved, recognizing the sense of place that they provide is valuable to current city residents, key to attracting future city residents, and integral to the developing economic generating heritage tourism from within the city. The commission is responsible for determining Montgomery County Historic Preservation Tax Credit eligibility, reviewing historic area work permits, conducting courtesy reviews, and nominating potential resources for historic designation. Persons will be considered who have demonstrated special interest, specific knowledge, or professional or academic training in such fields as history, architecture, historic preservation, architectural history, planning, archaeology, anthropology, curation, conservation, landscape architecture, urban design, or related disciplines. The Historic District Commission generally meets once monthly on the 4th Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. The position will remain open until filled. Resumes and letters of interest should be submitted via mail to Mayor and City Council, 31 South Summit Avenue, Gaithersburg, Maryland, 20877, or via email at cityhall@gaithersburgmd.gov. For more information, visit the city's website or contact planner Chris Berger at 240-805-1064.
Thank you very much, Rob. I want to mention something you didn't bring up, Rob, in that is last week we had the Councilmember Wu and I had the opportunity to meet with some residents over in the Hidden Creek neighborhood who've testified recently and to their dissatisfaction with the aesthetics of our cracked ceiling, our spot ceiling that we do on streets to extend the life of our assets. And so Rob and I went over there, saw the state of their street, which looks like a lot of streets in the city of Gaithersburg, including my own, and heard them out. And I want to note along those lines, we are going to have a work session about our street resurfacing program on March 14th. So I know they'll be interested in it. And I know, and if anybody else is, please join us that night and hear all about it, and feel free to give us your feedback. I also wanted to note, I testified just about 2 weeks ago to the county council on a tax duplication bill that's before them that will set the formulas and sort of help with the negotiations, reduce negotiations in the future between municipalities and the county government, in the county's reimbursement for services that we provide as municipalities that they would otherwise have to provide. We call it tax duplication. I think like 1 out of every 100 people you meet understands what we mean by tax duplication, but that's what we mean. And I will be testifying tomorrow before the county council on the capital improvements budget tomorrow evening as well. I'll be testifying on Wednesday before the state senate on the Sustainable Maryland program, reauthorizing that program. And one more note, on Saturday, former council member and I, Mike Sesma and I had a chance to go to the new Vine Alley, just a very private reception at Vine Alley, which is where, what was the wine place? I know
Wine Harvest, sir.
Wine Harvest.
There.
I've been to Wine Harvest a million times. I don't know why it just escaped me right that minute, but it did. It's in the same spot where Wine Harvest used to be. Now there's the Paseo that right next to it, so people can walk through, and it's beautifully illuminated in the evening. And they have outdoor seating ready and sort of windows that can open and sort of create a pass-through situation. They've really done a beautiful job with Vine Alley. I believe today is the official soft opening. If I recall the speeches from Saturday. I think the community is going to be really happy with it and excited about having this new gathering place, because I know everyone was so disappointed to see Wine Harvest leave. So look, that's good news for the community. It was a delight to see that. I want to note that next week we will have a work session to receive a report on Pepco charging stations. That will be Monday, February 14th, 7:30 p.m. However you're viewing this or joining us will be the same. If you'd like to be on the Zoom to testify at that meeting, then you can go sign up at gaithersburgmd.com/virtual. And with that, we'll go to from the city manager and Tanisha.
Thank you, Mayor Ashman. I'll be brief. Thanks from all of the council members who recognized how excellent of a test kit distribution that our staff was able to orchestrate really in a very short period of time. And I commend Carla Contreras for her coordination and all of the staff from Parks and Rec and Culture, as well as Public Works and the PIO team for pulling it all together. I think we were too efficient for our own good. We were able to distribute about 2,300 test kits over our 2 events, which was far short of our goal. We didn't have the participation we had hoped for, even with the second event being widely publicized well ahead of time. We think, obviously the demand has declined as Omicron has receded in the community and our numbers are coming down. But we want to make sure that Gaithersburg residents still have an opportunity to obtain free test kits. So we're going to continue to work with the county to do upon request distribution in our city facilities. So we don't need to stand up a drive-through operation to continue to distribute the kits. So that will continue. And I encourage the community to stay in touch with us via our website and social media on details. And there'll be signage in all of our facilities as well once we're able to stand that program up later this week. Thanks for everyone who came out to help the distribution. It was a lot of fun. We got to see some dance moves from certain council members that I won't name. And it was great fun, and the community was very, very appreciative. So we were happy to be a part of that. And we are also thankful to the county for partnering with us in that way. And that's all I have today, Mayor.
Thank you, Tanisha. I think I join all the rest of the council in saying, where's the video? We want the video of the council member dance moves. Tech team, if you could bring up Tom Lonergan-Sager for economic development update, that's great. In the meantime, I wanted to throw it over to Jim real quick to say a couple words. We both forgot to mention the Young Artist Awards concert. Go ahead, Jim.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a long few weeks since our last meeting. Like, oh yeah, I was at that too. Apologies. So yes, I had the honor of recording the award for the Carrie McMahon Dietz Award for Excellence, which is presented to the Gaithersburg resident in the Young Artists Award competition, who is from the city of Gaithersburg, who had the highest score. So I was able to present that virtually to David Wang, and just want to say congratulations to him, to all the winners, and our grand prize winner, Joseph An. It's a great event, and it's always wonderful when we can celebrate our young artists and encourage the music and the arts, especially at young ages. It's not all about liberal arts. It's not all about connecting the dots straight through to a job. It's about exploring. It's about celebrating your creativity. So congratulations, and thank you for giving me the chance to recognize them, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jim. I'm glad you did. I'll turn it over to Tom. Tom, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one item for you tonight. Back in 2012, you may recall the city awarded one of its very first opportunities grants to Adventist Healthcare to support the costs associated with improving about 70,000 feet of office space at 820 West Diamond Avenue, just behind Dogfish, and establishing the health provider's headquarters here in Gaithersburg. 10 years later, Adventist Health is not only still here, but they have also made a longer-term commitment to the city as their permanent home for their headquarters and support center. In the last quarter of 2021, Adventist Health purchased 820 West Diamond at a cost of about $24.3 million and have expanded their footprint, now occupying about 80% of the 142,000 square foot building. The company, already one of the city's largest employers with nearly 500 working in Gaithersburg alone, anticipates further employee growth in the coming years. And Adventist's CEO, Terry Ford, tells us that he wants to be an excellent partner with the city, which they have been. I have been in contact with representatives of Adventist, and we are planning to meet with them to discuss their plans to upgrade the building and, in their words, make it a proud home that reflects their mission and vision. We look forward to working with them towards that end, look forward to being an equally excellent partner so that we can support and advance that vision. I will certainly keep you posted as the conversation continues. And that's all tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, Tom. So next on our agenda is consolidated policy discussions. I'd like tech team, if you could bring up Rob Robinson, that would be great. And I believe the next three items are related to our adequate public facilities ordinance. Welcome to John Schlichting as well. Rob, take it away. Rob, you are currently on mute.
Thank you, Mayor. Good catch. If we could please go to packet page 142, please. Thank you, and good evening, members of the council. As the mayor mentioned, this is the consolidated policy discussion for text amendment CTAM 9110-2021. This is an amendment to the APFO ordinance to allow us to charge the city utilization premium payment fee, and also the regulations that go with this. Next slide, please. So a joint public hearing regarding the text amendment and the introduction of the draft regulations was held on December 6th. During their January 19th, 2022 meeting, the Planning Commission recommended approval of both of these, the regulations and the ordinance. And the council's text amendment record and the regulation comment period both closed at 5 p.m. January 24th, 2022. Staff notes no further items were entered into the records for either of these. Next slide, please. To briefly review, as there have been no changes since the public hearing on the text amendment, the APFO revision changes an incorrect reference, adopts the county utilization premium payment or UP standard and seat deficit tiers to establish the fee to be charged, adopts the tier rates to calculate the actual specific fee, changes references to the county specifically to dump the previous reference to the county school facility fee. Next slide, please. Changes the city manager's adequacy determination date from July 1st to the first business day in August. And as we mentioned during the public hearing, this is done so we have the superintendent's final CIP. So we have the final numbers to work with. It requires the adoption of regulations related to implementing the fee. It defines exemptions from the code section. It establishes a new effective date for the collection of the fee, which, should both items pass this evening, would be March 1st, so coming up on a little under a month. and it establishes the conditions and findings required to grant the waivers. And again, that there are no changes since our discussion, so that is what the text amendment is. Next slide, please. So as relates to the regulations, just as a reminder, it's composed of 6 sections: the intent, the applicability, definitions, procedure, administration, and waiver provisions. Next slide, please. Now, unlike the text amendment itself, there have been some revisions since the introduction, and these were really as it relates to the conversation and direction we received from the mayor and council and the planning commission during the joint public hearing, and from the Montgomery County Office of Management and Budget. And their comments have been included in the packet, but staff notes these were received shortly prior to introduction. So with the regulation not having been introduced, they weren't included in the background materials at that point. Next slide, please. So to go over the edits of the regulations, the first one is we've defined, the various housing typologies, such as the gap housing that we talked about with the Lake Forest Master Plan. And these have really been defined for the purposes of fee calculation in accordance with the section of the county code as shown on the screen. And this section of the county code is where they determine the applicable impact tax based upon housing typology. So this section aligns with how the county actually implements their residential and school impact taxes. The next two really are an outgrowth of, in particular, Councilmember Wu and Planning Commissioner Wessel's comments during the joint public hearing. We have deleted the assignment of the tiers and the rates at schematic development plan or preliminary plan. And this was an outgrowth. There was a lot of conversation given that because neither of those plan types expire, by assigning and designating tiers and rates at that point, by the time they actually come to fruition, not just a final site plan, but a building permit when the fees actually paid, it could be a number of years and the school context could change. Staff fully agreed about hearing that discussion that change needed to be made. So now the last bullet reflects that the tiers and rates used to calculate the fee for an applicable residential development will be established and calculated for said project at final site plan approval. So this is, in response to the comments received. At most, a final site plan again is only, approved for 2 years, so that, that we're not talking the potential of decades or many years. So we're basically now down to 2 years. Next slide, please. Another change was for amendment to final site plans revised to additionally require recalculation when a housing unit type is changed that alters a tier rate used. At introduction, the regulations talked about amendment to final plans or AFPs having a change when you introduced new units above what was calculated at final. What this does is you don't change the overall residential density, but because of the way calculation of impact taxes are done based upon housing typology, if you swap out a housing type, this will trigger, a re-revision to make up the balance. So again, as the example I use here, you're converting detached homes to townhomes. Obviously, those pay different rates under the impact taxes and therefore would be charged different rates under our fee. We wanted to add for clarity that the fee may be used for a school that resulting from an approved Board of Education boundary change increases available capacity in schools used to calculate the fee serving the applicable residential development project. This is for clarity. At introduction, the regulation, spoke about, if there was new construction of another school outside of, that relieves overcrowding or however we want to phrase it for a particular school, you can use it for this. This also at the recommendation of OMB talks about when there's a boundary change, and as new school construction begins, such as, the Crown High School eventually coming online, that will result in a boundary change. It trickles down to all the levels. So we wanted to make sure we were out front of that. Next slide, please. We also deleted the second year of construction limitation on fee disbursement. And this was, again, at the recommendation of OMB, and Finance Director Francisco and I had a good conversation. And we feel comfortable that the underlying purpose for that second year is addressed in the revised language. So again, Montgomery County Public Schools, no later than November 1st, will, identify all the capital projects, approved within the master plan and CIP, but it's really the construction CIP that served the city, create capacity, or under construction. We feel comfortable that this subtle change doesn't really, it still addresses what our concerns were, and namely that we have seen in the past a school that enters the CIP A good example of this was a number of years ago with Rachel Carson with Dufeef. Originally, we were understanding that Dufeef was going to be, get an addition and was going to reduce capacity at Rachel Carson. Due to budget constraints, that was removed. So if we had followed through on the first one and reduced stuff, it wouldn't have come to fruition. But writing in here that it's really within the construction CIP by the time they request it, because it wouldn't, as discussed in the regulation, it wouldn't be till the next fiscal year that the council would release the money at their discretion. This covers the same thing. Next slide, please. So that's a lot, but it's really not a lot. We've talked about this a number of times. It's laid out. So this evening, each by separate motion and order, we request that the council, take a vote on the text amendment itself first, follow that up with a vote on the regulations because the ordinance lays out that you need the regulations. And the third item that was added is we really want to make sure that we add into the fee schedule the rates that would be charged for the balance of this current year. So basically from March 1st to the first business day in August. So this is a clarification. And again, that really changing the fee schedule is dependent upon the other two actions occurring. And with that, staff is available. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Rob. Do we have any questions or comments? Lisa Henderson, please go right ahead. Then Rob will.
Thank you, Mayor. Rob, remind me, please, there was a provision, I believe, and I'm probably going to word it wrong, where if there was an opportunity for affordable housing and mayor and council wanted to achieve that affordable housing, we could vote to bypass the fee if they weren't. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So first off, there was two things at play. So one of the waiver provisions of the fee and or the 150% test was, the 30% affordable housing. But as we mentioned, and is shown in Deputy City Attorney Johnson's memo, MPDUs, moderately priced dwelling units under our program, are exempt from the fee regardless. So this is really only applicable to workforce housing. So you would still have to do 15% workforce housing and 15% MPDUs for a residential project to waive the fee on the workforce housing portion, as the MPDUs are already exempt.
Okay. Thank you.
Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have a question, just a comment that I guess my dog has a comment as well. But I think that the way that this is being revised really is the best way to capture the concern that had been addressed with respect to ensuring that the APFO is really applicable to what's going on the ground. So I appreciate those amendments being put in place. And now I can stop bothering Rob about that perennially.
Rob, good comment. Do you want to make the motion, our first of several motions here on the amendment of the ordinance?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, but let me get to, since you didn't read out which section, I have to actually go read it.
Page 140 of the package.
Okay, so 140. No. Which are we moving? Chapter 24?
Yes, if we could begin with the ordinance.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I move that the mayor and city council vote to approve ordinance to amend chapter 24 of the city code, article 15 entitled adequate public facilities, section 24-243 and section 24-246.
Okay, do we have a second? Jim.
Second.
Thank you. I will call the roll. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
All right, carries 4-0. Next, I have to scroll down to the right page, which I believe is page, is it 231, Rob? Is that where the next one is?
Bear with me 1 second. I have to go to the back of myself. Yes, it is. You are correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. then this is on the regulation. Do we have what's the pleasure of the council? If someone wants to make the motion, I recommend going to page 231 of the packet. Rob Wu.
Sorry, so much clicking. Mr. Mayor, I move that the mayor and city council vote to approve the Gaithersburg MCPS utilization and premium payment fee regulation, implementing city code section 24-246 as provided by chapter 2 of the city code entitled administration, section 10.
Okay, thank you. Neil Harris.
Second.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
And Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
All right, carries unanimously. And next, next
packet page 275. I got ahead.
Thank you, Rob. Packet page 275. If someone wants to move approval of the resolution, Neil Harris, go ahead.
Like to move approval of the resolution codifying and updating a schedule of fees, charges, fines, and expenses as provided for in the ordinances of the city of Gaithersburg to establish the Gaithersburg MCPS utilization premium payment fee rates for the remainder of fiscal year 2022.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Lisa Henderson.
Second.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember McNulty.
Aye.
And Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Rob Robinson, John Schlichting, thank you guys very much for getting
Thank
us
you.
to this point. And next, we have staff guidance. Tech team, if you could bring up Barbara Zektik, who I'm delighted to say it is not yet 10:30 at night, and we are calling her up. It makes me very happy. And let's also bring up Tom Lonergan Seeger, please.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening. Hello,
Members of the-
Barbara. Welcome.
Good evening. It's so early. I don't know what to do.
Tom, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, thanks. As you all know, the Maryland General Assembly convened in Annapolis on January 12th for their 444th legislative session, which runs for 90 days and will conclude on April 11th. We're only in the first month of its 2022 session, and the General Assembly has already introduced scores of bills for us to track and consider. And with us tonight is our legislative advocate, Barbara Zektik, with a brief update on some of the issues being deliberated in Annapolis this year, as well as the status of our own legislative priorities. Barbara, thanks for joining us tonight.
Of course. Good evening, everybody. Barbara Zektik with ZNC representing the city of Gaithersburg. It's a pleasure to work with you all. This session has been extraordinarily busy, as they all are, now that it's an election year. We've seen a lot of bills. Scores, I don't even think does it justice. I'm pretty sure Tom and I, and the help of all your wonderful staff, have probably reviewed at least 1,000 bills already this session. We are virtual still. However, we do expect that to change in the Senate next week. Originally, at the beginning of session, the Senate president came out and said that beginning on Valentine's Day, February 14th, the Senate would be going back to in-person hearings. Valentine's Day is next week, and we haven't heard anything to the contrary. So there's no guidance out yet about that, but we expect that to happen. The House still appears to be going virtual. But I'll tell you, those of us in Annapolis are very, very excited to get to walk into a building again after so many years. It feels like forever. Leadership session. They say the priorities are all about the C's. It's the easiest way to remember it, at least, because there's scores of priorities as well. COVID recovery continues to be a very important priority for leadership, and especially putting money into infrastructure improvements. There's a surplus in the budget for the first time that I've seen in maybe 20 years. So we're seeing a lot of money going into the capital budget for improvements. And so we're excited to see where that all goes. That's COVID recovery, childcare. There's a lot of issues circulating around making sure that childcare providers can continue to provide services in light of the pandemic and the difficulties that a lot of families have seen in supporting their families and their children given the pandemic and its effects. Climate change is very important. Mayor Ashman commented that he is going to be testifying on Wednesday on the Sustainable Maryland Program Fund enactment. So we're excited about that. We expect a lot of bills on climate change this session, and we're tracking those very closely. And cannabis. We do anticipate something to happen on legalizing adult use of cannabis this session. The House seems to be leaning towards passing a very simple bill that would put on the ballot in November the right for the people to vote for or against the legalization of adult use. The Senate generally has more plans to put a little more regulations into a bill, try to figure out what exactly that would look like. So that back and forth is going on right now, but we do anticipate something to happen on that. For Gaithersburg, most importantly, first I'll start with the budget. We were excited to see $275,000 in the governor's proposed capital budget for Morris Park through the Parks and Playgrounds program to replace the playground. So we anticipate that to stay there, but of course we're going to focus on making sure it stays there. And we are working on a bond initiative for $250,000 for Blum Park to work on the trails there and the boardwalk of the park. And Senator Kagan is sponsoring that bond initiative, and Delegate Barbe is sponsoring it for us in the House. We have so far put in testimony on 4 bills, or are in the works of putting in testimony on 4 bills. Mayor Ashman already commented on Sustainable Maryland. That's on Wednesday. We have put in legislation supporting Delegate Polakovich Carr's bill to enforce Vision Zero ideals. I know we talked, oh God, I'm so sorry to hear about the death that just happened and the funeral you went to. Vision Zero, this bill, what it would do is it would require the State Highway Administration to do a review of all relevant infrastructure within 6 months of a fatality by a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And so the city supported that bill. There is a bill that's coming up on creating a really onerous process for any elected official, municipality, county, state, on how to recall those elections. Basically, long story short, the bill would enable a very small portion, a very small percentage of the constituency to recall an election and put somebody else in place. We're opposing that bill. And there is a bill coming up that appears to be intended to give Montgomery County the authority to put automated enforcement programs such as speed cameras, bus cameras, and red light cameras, give authority to enact those programs to the Department of Transportation. We're just putting in a comment, just clarifying that the language in that bill specifically does not apply to the Gaithersburg speed camera program. The city's priorities. We are working very closely with MML this year. First of all, we are working on highway user restoration, as always. The governor has put in a bill that would release the sunset of the additional money that was added in 2018, keeping the municipalities at a 2% share of the gas tax revenues that go in. We're right now in the law, there is a sunset on that would go into effect next fiscal year. And that's when we would see those funds very seriously deteriorate. That's the governor's bill. MML is prioritizing a bill which just dropped today that's sponsored by Senator McRae and Delegate Anderton that would also bring those revenues back to the full restoration to which they were back in 2012. So we plan on supporting that bill, and that bill just dropped today, and that we'll see how that goes. I can't tell you how that's going to go because the bill just dropped today. We also have a priority about making sure that the municipalities can create their own police accountability boards, because under the current law, under the police reform that happened last session, whether intended or not, it was created so that counties create the police accountability boards, even for those municipalities that have their own police force, like the city of Gaithersburg. Unfortunately, I'm going to be completely honest, we haven't seen a ton of progress on that. There is a lot of ambivalence right now from the General Assembly in doing anything else with police reform, but we're still advocating strongly for that bill. We are receiving vague support for the idea, even if people don't have the appetite to reopen police reform. And we're hopeful if we don't have our own bill that drops on that, that we'll be able to amend on something else and see that happen. Additionally, another priority of the city of Gaithersburg is making sure that municipalities have a longer period of time to appeal real property tax assessments that have been conducted on commercial properties within the municipality. As I'm sure most of you know, the state does the tax assessments, even though most of the property tax revenue goes to the county or the municipality. We are been talking to Delegate Solomon about dropping that bill. He's dropped that bill in the past. We still anticipate that to happen. But we are also looking at amending on similar bills for that as well, because there's so many bills and so much opportunity. With that, I'll pause there. One more thing for those wondering, last session, Senator King, a good friend of the city's, did spearhead an initiative to try to prevent fairgrounds from having to pay their share of stormwater remediation fees. We were anticipating to see that bill come back again. She has told us it won't. So we're very happy about that. That's a win. New members, it's a pleasure to meet you. Forgive my rambling. I am going quickly, but if I can help you in any way, learn the session and how it is, please feel welcome to contact me at any time, and I'll make sure that you have my contact information. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It is good news indeed about the fairgrounds thing, because that caused us such a headache last year. A couple of notes, the Police Accountability Board initiative, just to give people, anybody who needs the background here, last year's police reform bills set into place a requirement that at the county level, they impanel a board to go over police use of force, and whenever there's a police initiated, when there's a death or officer involved shooting or anything of that nature, it would go to this Police Accountability Board for review and recommendation on various, remedies or punishments or accommodation, whatever the case is. But the state legislation impaneled this at the county level. It didn't take into account that municipalities have their own police agencies, as we do, with our own rules, with our own regulations, with our own arrangements with our police staff. And so I testified recently at the county level, because the county, in compliance with this state law, is working on its own bill to impanel this board, this Police Accountability Board. And so while Barbara's sort of working at the state level to see what we can get done there, we're sort of saying, well, we should do this on two tracks. And with the county, we should, at the very least, ask the county that if they're putting together this board, that they incorporate at least one member on this board that is from a municipality that has its own police agency. So at least that perspective would be represented, and that the Police Accountability Board doesn't just report to the county council and the county executive, but it also reports to the city council and to the police chief as necessary. But this is an example of where the General Assembly, we've seen this many times over the years, they have they mean really well, they want to get some good things done, and they rush to do it, and they paint with such a broad brush that they cause different sorts of problems, not understanding the different jurisdictional complications between of trying to implement this. So anyway, thank you for your efforts on that, Barbara. And I have one question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything. This is really just out of curiosity. You mentioned two bills on HUR, one sponsored by the governor, the other sponsored by Delegate Henderson and Senator McCray. Is there a substantive difference? I mean, I'm assuming they're both removing the sunset, but what else is the difference here?
So the other thing that the bill would do, the McRae and Anderson bill would get you more money. So right now, I believe the restoration was about 85% of what municipalities used to get before 2012, when the formula was changed. In other words, municipalities used to get, I think 3% of all the money that's in this fund that's managed by MDOT and is basically gas tax revenues. They used to get 3%. 2012, you basically got slaughtered, you got nothing. And in 2018, they bumped it back up to 2%. So what the MML bill will do that dropped today is get you 1% more for all the municipalities. And I can follow up with what that means for Gaithersburg. I don't know the dollar amount right now, but it's more money.
Yeah, I'm sure we're supportive of more money that as a as a principle. Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Barbara? And if not, we just say thank you very much for all the good representation and going to bat for us. We really appreciate it. These are some important matters.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And congratulations for actually being done with this by 9:05 p.m. at one of our meetings. I told you, they don't all go to 10:30 or 11 o'clock.
I believe it.
So with that, I already heard from Dennis. We're not expecting anything from any other staff. Lynn, do we have anything from you?
Nope, nothing this evening.
Okay, well then with that, I'll remind everyone we have a work session next week, 7:30 p.m. Monday. A great way to spend your Valentine's evening with us talking about Pepco charging stations. We look forward to it. And until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.